Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to theCUBE's live coverage of Red Hat Summit Ansible Fest 2025 here in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm your host, Rebecca Knight, alongside my co-host and analyst, Rob Strechay. Rob, let's talk security.
This is one of the highlights of the week for me, is talking about this, because I think you can never talk about this too much.
Indeed, you can't. And so with that, I would like to welcome back to the program Vincent Danen. He is Vice President of Product Security at Red Hat. Thank you so much for returning.
Thank you so much for
here.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me come back.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, I like talking about security.
Exactly. So let's start with RHEL 10, because not a new version of RHEL does not exactly come around every year. The way we do. What makes this release such a milestone in enterprise security?
Well, I think there's a couple. I mean, the first and maybe most obvious one is post-quantum capabilities that are in there, right? So everyone who's kind of looking for a future where they're quantum capable or post-quantum resistant, RHEL 10 lays that foundation. It's not there by default, so we're not necessarily using it all by default, but for those customers who want to use it or play with it, start experimenting with it, the capabilities are there, which is great from a, secure it now so that we can't decrypt it later if things get stolen, right? From that perspective, it's really good. And then I think the other thing that's really exciting about it is the whole image mode, right? Because that gives you, they talk about, ability to prevent drift, quicker upgrades, all those sorts of things. But I look at it as like, now you have this immutable base that I can roll back if something goes sideways, whether it's security or otherwise, right? And then rapid ways of making sure that my entire fleet is at the same level of security across the board, because now we can do these operating system updates in a better, more efficient way.
I was going to say, on the post-quantum thing, how much do you see of people actually playing with it or putting it into production and things of that nature now? Because to me, that maybe we're 3, maybe we're 5, maybe we're 10 years away, depending on who's quantum thing. There's people who are buying quantum now, like for specific reasons. But I think it's, you're in this day to day and understand more the ins and outs of it than I do, to put it mildly. And I think it's, how close are we to needing that is always the question mark.
I don't know. Every time you turn around, there's a new quantum computer. And so I feel like the cliff is sooner, is closer than it was before, right? So whether it's 3 years, 5 years, or God forbid 6 months, right? Hopefully not. We're definitely marching closer to that edge. But you'd asked that question earlier about how many customers are using this in production. I think it's 0. Right. So right now it's all very theoretical, and not to be Debbie Downer or anything like that, but even these quantum resistant algorithms that we have not been put through the same paces as all the cryptography that we've had up to today. Right, so we've had a bunch of algorithms before, and then we find a vulnerability or a weakness in them, and we're like, take that one off the list, that we're not going to use it anymore. But all of these quantum algorithms are still new, and they're the ones that we have the most belief or faith in moving forward. But at the end of the day, until those quantum computers come out and actually start trying to break this stuff, we're not going to know whether or not we bet on the right horse, right? So it's still this very nebulous space where we think we're doing it right. We're definitely being prepared. Nobody's ready for it yet. Right? And I think, again, going back to RHEL 10, we've taken that first step to make it possible for people to start playing with it. But once the quantum computers start actually trying to break these things, then we'll realize just how much work we have ahead of us.
Yeah, and you can't upgrade it if it's not there to begin with, right? Is that part of the thinking, is that, hey, knowing that algorithms are going to change and mutate and become better from that perspective, that must be like the impetus to get it in there, so that, hey, we can go and do updates to algorithms and to the encryption.
Right, and that's kind of where we look at things like crypto agility, like how quickly can I move from one algorithm to another, right? Probably easy enough to do when you're looking at communications, so say TLS or whatever. But even there, if RHEL has all the TLS capabilities in it for your browser, for all your applications to communicate, we're still looking at what do we have for quantum resistant certificates and the certificate providers and issuers, and then we're looking at the, CDNs and Akamai and all of these other places where it's like those communications routes through, like all of that has to be done as well. So we can have like RHEL 10 talking to RHEL 10, like, sure, okay, you could totally do that, but across the globe, maybe not yet, right? And those are things that we're all kind of moving towards.
So as you said, I mean, I don't know how you sleep at night with all these concerns about the harvest now, decrypt later threats, and all the other components of what you said of it in terms of how we're thinking we're betting on the right horse, but we're not sure because it's not here yet. How do you communicate that to customers who are scared and legitimately scared? This is rational, their fear.
Oh, 100%. And I think that when we're looking at the communications pieces, right, it's what are the other things that you have in place that kind of prevent, say, a man-in-the-middle attack that's listening and siphoning off all this encrypted traffic that they can try to decrypt later, right? So, I mean, it's more than just the cryptography itself, because right now, like the cryptography that we have is, we're waiting for that quantum computers to break the cryptography that we have. Right. So we're basically looking to how do we get better cryptography that these quantum computers won't, or we assume, won't be able to decrypt, right? But so right now we still have that security in place, and it is that future-looking state that we're looking at, right? So until we upgrade that crypto to protect it, we're still going to find ourselves in this spot where we don't know what we don't know. We can only, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And then I think, as with all things security, it comes down to how do we respond, right? Like we can do all of this proactive stuff that we want, whether it's crypto, whether it's secure development or AI or any of these things, but how do we respond when the theoretical is realized? Like for me, that's always been the response part is the most critical piece.
So let's shift gears a little bit. I mean, there's some regulation happening these days. We started with DORA, and now not the Explorer, but
the other DORA.
The other DORA over in Europe. And now we got CRA, which was put into act back in December. Yep. Doesn't go into, you don't start getting fined about it until December of 27. What are you seeing as customers asking from Red Hat to help with, meet that now? So, people want to be cyber resilient anyways, but how do you see that impacting what you're doing?
Yeah, the CRA is more around the consumption or the development of the software, right? And the response part, like how do you inform government of vulnerabilities that you find, like the 0 days and whatnot. And I think that, speaking on a Red Hat perspective, we're pretty good at all of those things anyways, right? Like some of the mechanisms might be different. Who do we talk to might be different. But the challenge that we have right now is like the act is there and like the intent has been defined, but not all of the standards have been defined. So we know that we have to be a certain height to ride the ride, but we don't yet know what that height actually is, right? And so we're kind of involved in trying to help, I don't want to say manipulate, but help like regulators understand what some of the challenges that we see as implementers of these standards, like what's the burden that's going to be on us, right? And we're software.
And what the real risks are too.
And what the real risks are, right? Because you can't put so much regulation into a space where there's very little risk, right? Because at that point you stymie all innovation, because now all of this time, effort, and money is spent on reducing risk for something that really doesn't matter, right? And at the same time, like, I want to give kudos to the CRA that they've kind of walked back on where they initially started. Because they initially started with a lot of burden on, say, open source maintainers. That, wow. In some circles, we kind of talked about it in a way like, do you want to kill the golden goose? Right? Because open source has provided so many benefits to the planet at large. Everyone, no matter where you are, reaps the benefits of these things. And if you start to regulate these maintainers, many of whom are hobbyists and are doing it for fun and the enjoyment of it, and they didn't ask for their software to become critical, right? It's good stuff, and we all said that's the right thing we want to use, and we made it critical, not that maintainer who was just scratching an itch, right? How do we prevent them from being penalized and not wanting to like step back and be like, the liability is too great to work on open source. So we've walked away from that, which is great. Now we have to figure out what standards are there that we have to meet. And those things, because they're not defined yet, we have customers asking us, like, how do we meet them? Well, like, we don't actually know what the finish line looks like yet. We can make some pretty educated guesses. So we think you could use these tools or these kind of processes or policies to get there. But I mean, at the end of the day, they're just educated guesses right now. So we're still in this kind of flux period of like, try to influence what we can, try to make sure that it's sensible and pragmatic and not overbearing, right? And then just kind of deal with it when it lands.
So I think, to me, and I'm interested in the thinking, because you also had some stuff around, extended support and and CVEs, obviously a big thing.
Yeah.
Is some of this influencing, is like what's happening with CRA influencing the decision to go down that path, or is it just as simple that, people get on RHEL 10, they're not moving for a long time? Like, people don't like, I know I started out as a Unix and a Linux admin, so,
yep.
I hated moving to like that next big version kind of thing, so.
Yeah, I think I mean, we'd like people to move to RHEL 10, and then when RHEL 11 comes out in however many years, we'd like people to move there as well, right? Because that's where all the innovation happens.
Right.
I think some of the decisions around like addressing more vulnerabilities isn't so much CRA driven, but just what we're seeing in the space today with all these vulnerability scanners spitting out all of these vulnerabilities. And I mean, we have a pretty sensible way of rating these things, and our lifecycle policies are pretty clear as to what we fix. But the pressure on customers from people who maybe don't understand that risk posture to remediate some of these things where we say they're not risky and our evidence and data proves it out. But the auditor's like, well, I don't understand and I don't know, and it makes me uncomfortable, so I actually want these things fixed. I think that decision is going to lower the number of customers who have to respond, maybe ask hard questions or provide hard answers to their auditors. And so I think that can be a real benefit for our customers to know that even though it's not critical and it's not important, it's a moderate that meets a certain threshold, we're going to fix it. And they should see maybe some of their pain dissipate, which is kind of what we're after. And then we give them a choice, right? Like when you're looking at the security select, if there are things that don't meet that criteria but are truly impactful for your business, we've heard you, and we're going to fix those things as well as you're a part of that program so that you can take care of the things that maybe don't show up high on a severity list or a CV scan, but they're truly impactful for your business. And you're like, I actually really need that thing fixed. Now there are options.
So speaking of things that are truly impactful for your business, I want to ask you about AI and how it is changing how you work with your team and how you interact with customers and developers. And also, as you said, how it can stimulate innovation, but perhaps stymie it in other ways too. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a very big topic. But I think that for some of the things that we're looking at, like I see some real dangers in AI, but I also see some real positive benefits, right? And those are the ones that I'm most interested in, right? Because on the negative side, like AI might make, executing attacks faster and easier, maybe more creative in some ways, right? But then on the same side, we can use AI as a defensive posture to maybe detect these things. Maybe we can use it to detect more vulnerabilities that we then have to fix and things like that. So on that side, like AI is both beneficial and potentially negative. I'm looking at it more from like the tooling perspective. Because in the vulnerability space, whether it's CV scans or like SAST tooling or things like that, like there's a lot of false positives that get spit out. There's also false negatives that don't necessarily get reported that are, to me, are the more impactful ones, right? But if we can use AI to reduce the noise of some of these things, then we allow the defenders or software vendors to actually focus on, like you say, the meaningful things, the things that actually are impactful. If I have a SAST scan with 1,000 findings on it, and 990 of them are complete garbage and totally irrelevant, it would be nice if I had a tool that would basically say like, yeah, don't worry about these 990 for these reasons. They fall into these buckets, safe to ignore. But these 10, you really have to pay attention to. I'm not going to find those 10 if they're like in the middle of that, like if I go from top to bottom and they're the ones who are in the middle, how much time does it take me to get there? And could that threat be realized before I even get to it? Or do I even have the people to be able to look at it at all? Like, this is very manual intensive work. And when you're looking at CVEs, I think some interesting innovations that could happen is if I look at the way that my code is used, right? And if I can do some analysis on those code paths, then I can sit there and go, well, this vulnerability is in this library or this dependency that's not actually used by this thing. And maybe AI can map that out and prove that to me. And then I can be like, oh, I can actually take that thing off my list. I can waive it. I don't have to worry about it because that code will never be executed, even though it's a dependency, because some other part of that library is what's actually impacted for you. To do that as a human being is really, really hard. To do that with AI might be pretty simple, like a couple clicks away, like I use this is my use case, and tell me stuff, right? And so those are the things that I'm pretty excited about.
So kind of final word, and I think one of the things that I'm very curious about is responsible AI. Now, you're given that your product security,
yep,
you have AI product, tooling and infrastructure that you're selling out there. How does responsible AI and security influence that?
Yeah, that's a big one too, because we're still even trying to figure some of these things out. I've had a number of conversations over the last couple of days around like AI security, AI safety, and I think those are two legs on a three-legged stool. The other one is preference. I think we're just preference, right? And so like the AI security pieces are probably pretty straightforward, right? You look at things like the impacts to confidentiality, to integrity, or to availability, the traditional CIA triad of security, right? If it doesn't meet one of those things, then it's probably in the safety or preference bucket, right? And that's where we kind of look at the safety pieces to me are like life and limb, right? Like we want to make sure that AI is doing responsible things and the sorts of answers that it provides or the actions that it suggests, or at some point when we're looking at an agentic future, the actual actions that it will take, right? And then there's the preference piece, right? Which is like societal, geopolitical, like what might be acceptable in a Western country, not necessarily acceptable in an Eastern country, but is that a safety thing? I mean, maybe not. Like it might feel unsafe to me, but that's still a preference, right? And so I think we have to figure out all of those pieces. And when I look at the platforms and tools to enable the AI usage, I think one of the really strong areas of focus is going to be how easy do we make it for customers to understand the capabilities of a model, right? Do we have something in like a model card that says useful in these scenarios? These are the sorts of things that it spits out. So you decide which model you want, maybe based on some of those characteristics. I think looking at some other tools, Trusty AI is one of them, right? Like how do I build guardrails around these things so that if I have an application, and I'll pick on some of our own stuff like the Lightspeeds, right? They're meant to answer questions about RHEL or Ansible or OpenShift. I wouldn't want the RHEL Lightspeed to be providing answers for some other Linux distribution, right? Because it might spit out answers that are wrong in the RHEL context. And so that's not a safety thing either necessarily. I mean, would be obnoxious,
yeah,
right? But so the guardrails that we have to define around that is like, only provide answers that are pertinent to RHEL or Ansible or whatever the product is, right? And for any situation. So for me, it's like, how easy do we make it to build those guardrails? Because that should be really easy. Otherwise, it may slow their adoption because it becomes really hard, or they just don't do it at all, right? And I think maybe one of the greater advances that we should see is make this stuff really, really, we want AI to be really easy to use, make it really easy to fit inside the box that you want it to play in as well.
Great. These are big questions. Great advice. Thank you so much, Vincent.
Thank you.
I'm Rebecca Knight for Rob Strechay. Stay tuned for more of theCUBE's live coverage of Red Hat Summit Ansible Fest. You're watching theCUBE, the leader in enterprise tech news and analysis.